so welcome to everyone to the November 22nd Town Hall from Congregation Or Hadash and Temple Emmanuel. We also extend a welcome to our special guest, Rabbi David Wolfman. Rabbi Wolfman's been serving as our consultant for our combination since April 2020, and he's been helping us with the human side of change. He's provided a dispassionate view from the balcony, and his guidance and wisdom has helped as we work to enable a vote on a plan of consolidation. We have listened to your voices, your strong voices, which in February said yes by a wide margin to the Memorandum of Understanding to move forward toward becoming a single new Reform congregation. So thanks all for the support along the way. And today is a key element in our communication, where we'll be looking at finance and facilities in the reverse order. Let me explain how the meeting is going to be conducted today. We'll hear from the Joint Facilities Task Force first, and then we'll have a report from our Joint Finance Task Force. We will meet until 5 p.m. Unless we are ready to end earlier. And with such a large group, we won't be able to have actual conversation back and forth. And so everyone except the presenters will be muted. But please do send any questions to Sydney Ruskin, and she will send those questions to the appropriate presenter / individual who can answer them. We will stay focused on today's topics, but any questions on other areas will be forwarded to myself and to Elaine Jones, president of Or Hadash, for later responses. And forgive me for not introducing myself, Scott Arden, president of Temple Emmanuel. Please also note that we are planning 1 to 2 additional town hall meetings in December, and dates and topics are still being discussed and aligned.
Okay. I'm Elaine Jones, as Scott said, president of Or Hadash. I wanted to say that, we've come a long way in the last 2 years in considering a future together. We're already sharing many aspects of synagogue life. Our religious schools are together. Our social justice committee with Mark Sbar and Jill and others have been working together. Some of our Friday night services are together, and we celebrated high holidays together. And on November 8th, a couple of weeks ago, we heard results of the Listen, Shape, Share project. That was focus groups conducted over the summer and a little bit into fall. And we had more than 150 voices in those focus groups total from both synagogues. On November 8th, we also heard updates about the Vision and Naming Task Force, and we'll be sending out a new vote on the finalists for that pretty soon. You'll be receiving a list of the top nominations, and I think that'll be out, pretty soon. As Rabbi Lockheim has often encouraged us, let's take a done well, do better approach to what we're doing today as we hear these reports. And in the near future, we'll be conducting congregational voting on a plan of consolidation, or a POC, targeting December for a vote. The voting will be conducted primarily through electronic voting, and the plan of consolidation that you'll be voting on will include the name and the vision for Congregation New, and we'll have bylaws. We'll send you an organizational chart and names of board members. If the plan of consolidation is approved by both congregations, there'll be a period of transition when we continue work of becoming a new congregation together. So it won't happen overnight, assuming if it is approved. So there'll be many things to work out even after that. I'd like to introduce, is Marjorie here? Marjorie Hochberg?
Let me unmute. Yes.
Oh, hello, Marjorie. Thank you.
I'm here.
Okay. Okay, Marjorie is going to give us our Devar Torah to set our tone as we go forward.
So this is a Devar Torah written by Rabbi Selson and delivered by me this afternoon. Shema Yisrael, listening is an art, a skill. As such, listening takes prep. It takes a certain attitude, and it takes a predisposition to give credit where credit is due. The men and women to whom we listen today, and to whom we listened 2 weeks ago, and to whom we will listen in the weeks ahead, are credit worthy. Their team represents you and me. They care about us. They care about the communities of faith which have nurtured us and which we have nurtured. They care about our past. They care about our present. And most of all, they care deeply about our future, and the future of progressive Judaism here in the Old Pueblo. Communities in transition, like societies in transition, are tinged with sadness. Such sadness is genuine, natural, and real. It is a reaction to the loss of the comfortable and of the familiar, which have betokened our identities. It is a part of who we are, absent of what we have been. Our spiritual sanity demands that we recognize it and respect it. Such sadness, mingled with our hopes for the morrow, is the music of transition. At the same time, communities in transition, like societies in transition, are fertile grounds for assumptions not based on fact, for theories invented out of whole cloth, for suspicions projected from insecurities. These phenomena can infect our spiritual sanity. We can't afford to give them credence. Such babble, mingled with our fears of the future, is the noise of transition. As the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks reminded us, faith is the ability to hear the music beneath the noise. Shavua Tov, everyone.
Thank you, Marjorie Hockford, cantorial soloist. Thank you very much for reading that on Rabbi Salson's behalf. And Rabbi Salson is traveling where he would be with us at this session. So with those beginnings, we will transition now into the main portion of today's town hall. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Steve Toffel. Steve Toffel is a longtime member of the Tucson Jewish community, has been a member of Temple Emmanuel for longer than I can even count, and is of course prominent in the Tucson community with his construction business. We couldn't be more pleased to have Steve Toffel as the head of our Joint Facilities Task Force. Take it away, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I want to start off, before I really get into the bulk of the report, I want to kind of review how we got here and some of the things we need to kind of keep in mind. As you probably recall, we started this process just a little under 2 years ago. And after a number of meetings with the ambassadors, the board of both congregations took a vote and decided that they did want to pursue the concept of merging the congregations. Shortly after that, the ambassadors were assigned a task of identifying 3 sections of information, all geared towards the presumption that we are merging. So the first thing to keep in mind is that what we and all of the task force were doing was fulfilling that obligation of figuring out what was going to happen during a merger. So with that in mind, remember that we assumed that a merger was taking place and that everything we worked for was determining what the best things were that we could do for the facilities. And so let me just share my screen. Can you all see it now? Okay. My wife's in the other room and she said yes, so I heard it from everybody. So the first thing I want to identify is our team. Well, actually, let me tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'll tell you what I told you at the end. We're going to review the team members, but we're also going to look at the history of the original Facilities Task Force. And that's kind of repeating what I said before. What were we supposed to be doing to fulfill the obligations of the facility team? Then we'll do an update of what the facilities team has been doing since about June. And then we'll cover a timetable of action for the facilities team and then other considerations. And I want to just a little preview of the timetable for action. Our timetable is to evolve to going out to bid, like in the next week, to a number of contractors to give us firm quotes for what it's going to cost to do the tasks that we've identified. The intent is to, for the most part, especially the major trades, is to get at least 3 bids. So we know we're getting competitive numbers and we have a reasonable idea of what the cost should come out to be. A question was raised at one time, should we hire a independent third-party consultant to do an inspection of the building? And it's not a bad idea, but when you look at the qualifications of our team, on the Temple Emmanuel side, we have 2 general contractors, a home builder, a structural engineer, and then Oleg Chuskowski, who is the facilities manager at Temple and knows more about that building than anybody else. He's very smart. And he's really on top of things. At Congregation Or Kadash, Ben Vogel is an architect. Mo Reebok is a civil engineer. Andy's a commercial developer and is used to developing commercial property and going through the whole process of what you do to buy out a job. Lanny Colton's in real estate, and Jim Liebeskind is Oleg's counterpart at Or Kadash with a very strong back in facilities. So, and then we have all of these subcontractors that we've been talking to. So looking at code issues and looking at, what kind of work we need to do is we think we have enough in-house capability to do that. And so we've relied on that for this entire report. So moving on. So bearing in mind that our objective was to determine what we're going to do with our facilities. Number one, we're going to merge. So do we go to the Alvernon facility? Do we go to the country club facility? Do we sell them both and go someplace else? And the go someplace else, what we looked at was buying another property and building on it. We could have looked at finding another property and leasing it, or some other options like that. But the option that we selected for we're going to sell both properties or move out of both properties, let me say, was to build a new property. So we'd have to buy something and then build it. So we ended up evaluating all of those options and recommended the improvements that we probably would want to make to each facility. And I'm not representing all of those. If you want to see that information, on the website, we have the PowerPoint presentation from what I'm calling the facilities task force, as opposed to the facilities team today. And that information is all there. At that time, as you may recall, we had things divided into 3 categories. One was the high priority, which we called number 1. The second was a medium priority. And the third was, I'll call it the wish list. If we have extra money, we'd love to do this, but if we can't do it right away, it's okay. So we went through all of those analyses and then made recommendations. So going to the next slide. I've kind of already covered that. If we sell both properties, and sell is maybe is turning out to be kind of a hot item from the standpoint that we have not, our committee, nor frankly the entire joint executive committee, have made any decisions as to what we're going to do with the Or Kadash facility. As you all know, we opted for the third choice, which was to move our operations to Country Club. But we don't know what's going to happen with Or Kadash, and there's lots of things available, and I frankly am not going to discuss them because it's out of my pay grade, as I like to say. So the alternative then is to everybody moves to the Alvernon campus, and we have to expand it to be able to accommodate the joint congregation with all the meetings and the classes and things like that. Or we go to the Country Club campus and we improve what we need to. Bear in mind the Country Club campus is large enough and has enough classrooms and meeting spaces to accommodate everybody. At one time, we had 700 or 800, even more families as members, and the facility accommodated everybody very nicely. A question has come up, do we know where everybody's going to office? And right now, we probably do not have quite enough offices for everybody, but we've studied it enough that we know we can solve that problem. And there's a number of options available. There's a question that came up that people heard I was thinking about, and this is just Steve Toffel thinking. I haven't really, no decisions have been made, but one option is to take all of the items in the so-called museum that you find right next to the east entry and put it in display cabinets around in the sanctuary or chapel or places like that, where frankly, it would be viewed more and might be a nice backdrop for services. That's being said, that might free that space up for a gift shop. It's smaller, we would have to consolidate, and we would probably still have to use the old storage, which is behind the gift shop, for supplying and moving merchandise back and forth. Not impossible to do, but that's just one consideration. That would free up the gift shop to do up to 4 offices if we needed to. So anyway, I don't want to get too much in the weeds. We think we can solve that part of it. At Country Club, there's a couple of things we need to do for sure, and that was what we call priority 1. There's some deferred maintenance, there's some code issues, and I'll be getting in all that when we talk about the team. Methodology. So the first thing we had to do is evaluate the market values for the 2 properties. We did not have any budget for hiring what's the word I'm looking for, guys? Somebody to do that. Anyway, an appraiser, there we go. And so again, with the background we had, we came up with our own estimates. And we also, since we have general contractors and architects on board, we estimated the cost of building a replacement facility to Temple Emmanuel. We did the same thing on the Alvernon facility. And we had a little bit of help there because there had been an attempt to expand it about 3 years ago, I believe. And Jim Liebeskein is going to address that shortly. In fact, this is probably the place to do that. Jim, could you jump in and just talk about that a little bit of what we had to come up with cost? Because the bottom line is we came up with a total cost of $800 to $1.2 million, I think it was. Jim?
Yeah, about 3 years ago, we were looking at the expansion of the property. We actually hired a consultant. We went out to bid, and in order to build to accommodate Or Hadash at the time, plus a percentage of growth, it was estimated that we would need somewhere between $1.9 and $2.1 million, with another $500,000 to bring the rest of the property up to the current code. So that's where that really never took hold. So, but that was at the time what we were looking at. That would have given us a 8,000 to 9,000 square foot building, and additional classrooms and other offices and facilities.
Thank you, Jim. And then the last thing we had to do was evaluate what improvements we wanted to do at Country Club, and then how much would those cost. And clearly, we could come up with a really long list and spend a horrendous amount of money. We don't need to do that, and we don't want to do it, and frankly, we can't do it. So we need to be rational about where we go with this. So here's what we came up. We estimated the market value for the Alvernon property at $1.4 million, a market value for Country Club property at $2 million, and a cost to rebuild the new property. And so rather than going to the next slide, which doesn't have these numbers, if you think about selling both properties, you have $3.4 million, you still need $5.6 million to build a new property. Both Temple and Or Hadash have had recent capital campaigns, less widely known at Temple Emmanuel, but both of us did, and they've been unsuccessful. It's really hard to raise that kind of money these days. So that really enters into the decision. Do we even have the ability to build a new facility? And for that matter, if we are going to build a new facility, selling the other two, the price we get for it is a function of how quickly we want to sell it. As many of you know, if you want to sell it quickly, you take less money. If you can wait, you can get more money. All those options would create built-in delays that at the time we felt were unacceptable. So there's the 4.5 million we would need. I think I miscalculated that. 3.6. Yeah, that's right. 4.5. So the 500 to $1.2 million to complete the Country Club property, the high priorities up to the few we'd like to do that. was important and would be something we felt we could get the money for, you know, and we're not talking about how that money is going to be raised right now, nor by the end of my session am I going to even talk about it. The other problem with not staying at the country club facility is that the early childhood education center, we felt moving that, and this is the people who were running the ECE, really felt if we took the chance of moving it, we might take a chance of losing the whole operation. And as many of you know, that has been a very successful operation. It has historically, and I'm talking about over the last 3 or 4 years, been generating in excess of $250,000 to $350,000 of excess money a year. Temple has been operating. Well, I'm getting into Gary's here. So anyway, we didn't want to take the chance of losing that operation. So now we get in the team activity. We're now wanting to start fine tuning where we want to go with everything, and come up with some final development costs. So instead of going priority 1, 2, 3, we thought, well, let's really look at it from the standpoint of what are the things we really have to do? What are the things we better do? And then what are the things we'd like to do? The things we have to do are things to do code compliance. And as example, we are in the process of getting a proposal. Actually, we're getting a set of specifications to drawing for a new fire alarm system, which at the current time operates. And we did just pass the fire department's inspection. So we're good for another year, but we know that we have to upgrade that system. So that's one of our code compliance issues. There are some accessibility issues, which at the time the facility was built were not required. You all heard of the ADA accessibilities, it's the American Disabilities Act. And that has a whole lot of requirements, which basically allows people who are disabled, impaired in any way, whether it's physically or hearing or sight, can get around. So from our standpoint, we don't like to see steps. We don't like to see doors that are too narrow. We need corridors that are wide enough for handicap for chairs. So we looked at that. We looked at deferred maintenance, and there's really just a few deferred maintenance items that are going to be big. The roof needs to be replaced. And I will tell you that although we don't have firm bids, we do have some numbers that tells us that's going to be in the 120,000 range. The south parking lot needs to be improved. And one of the reasons is that as we build up our membership again, we will not have enough parking on the north parking lot. So the south parking lot is an important asset to develop and make it not the stepsister of the south parking lot. And so we have estimates to do that, including, some of you may know, at the southwest corner of that, there are dumpsters. We want to enclose that dumpsters and make them aesthetically agreeable. So about 130,000 to do that. So we're basically at 250,000 for that, for those two items. And we think that the fire alarm system, we don't have any bids yet, but we've tried to be very conservative, and we're pumping it all the way up to 100 grand. I'm not sure it's going to be that much, but that takes us to $350,000. There's lots of other little things, and when I throw them all in a pile and start evaluating them a little bit at a time, there's 10,000 here, 20,000 there. Our estimate right now is we can get where we need to get with about $500,000. It could be less. But again, I kind of want to be conservative and make sure that we don't all come into this thing, okay, we can figure out how to raise $500,000 and find out later it's going to be a bigger number than that. So the other thing I mentioned is ramps. I didn't mention is ramps and entryways. Right now, we have accessible entries. The south entry is all on one level. The west entry at one time, and I wasn't aware of who did it, and I'm not going to point fingers, but there was a ramp installed so people could roll up the ramp. But the ADA has specifications for ramps, and that doesn't even come close. So the ADA also says what you need is at least one accessible entry in a commercial building. Our plan is to end up with two because the having expanded and improved the west parking lot, excuse me, the north parking lot and now the south parking lot, we felt that one of the primary entrances would again become what was originally supposed to be the main entrance, which is on the east side, the Country's Club side. So in keeping with that, our intent is to repair all those doors, and that means replacing them. They are in very bad disrepair and almost unusable. And at the same time, we will augment visually that area. Another question, by the way, I had was because I put in, we want to do signage and logos, and which we currently have on the outside of the building with a new name and a new logo. We want to, of course, change those looks so that we're entering our new congregational facility. We're not entering the old Temple Emmanuel. So that we'll have that resolved. I think that's going to be a $20,000 to $30,000 if we want to really do a nice job. As some of you may remember, on the south entry, we had a really nice mosaic. It was falling in disrepair and pieces were actually falling out, and there's a potential of them falling and hitting people and injuring them. So unfortunately, we had to take it down. So right now we have a blank face, but we would do something there to again enhance the building. I personally would like to see some annuals planted at the front east entry to really jazz it up and make it a really welcoming environment. The other ramp that we had explored immensely is the ramp going up to the Bema. And at this point, I want to report on a very preliminary basis. Nothing's been decided. Nothing's been decided. That in the sanctuary, I met with the entire ritual, the staff, clergy staff, this week. And we came up with what I think is a really interesting and frankly, very economical solution. And that is to build a low platform about one step up from the main floor. And by the way, I also use a transit and shot. And interestingly enough, the sanctuary slopes down for only halfway. And then it's flat from there all the way to the Bema. So the whole central area, if we removed all of the pews, you'd have a flat area. And the idea would be to remove the lower pews in the center, on either side of the center aisle, and basically turn them 90 degrees so they're facing each other. That opens up a large area in the middle and a room for a platform. And it may mean that people who are mobility disabled don't need to go up to the top. So we may end up with a way to get rid of the ramp entirely, which would be delightful. We're going to try and get brighter lights and some other things like that to brighten it up. But I think for very little money, we can make that place be different than it is now and very, very acceptable, aesthetically pleasing to everybody. So I think I've already talked about deferred maintenance, the entry doors, the roofing, south parking lot. There was a request, by the way, on the south parking lot to not put in carports and solar. And in fact is, we do not need to. And so they also requested that we put in some landscaping, and we have been exploring that amongst ourselves and with our paving contractors. And at the present time, they're telling us that, gee, that would be really nice, but it's not a good idea, but the roots long-term are gonna come up and destroy the paving. So we're not quite as receptive to that, but it's not off the table yet. But I wanted to share with that. The air conditioning has been there for 19 years. We've been having it maintained very nicely over the last few years, and Achilles Air Conditioning has been great doing that. I've asked them to do a study to give me the age and the expected lifetime for those units, and I anticipate that we will be able to set up some kind of replacement reserve and schedule replacement of the air conditioning over about a 5-year period so that it is not a big hit at the beginning when we first move in. And I think that should work. Aesthetic improvements, we want to replace the flooring in the sanctuary. It's almost a safety improvement because there are some rips and there's some places where it become a trip hazard. We're leaning towards carpet tiles. Number one, carpet tiles these days are really nice. They've vastly improved the quality and the longevity of the tiles. So we can do that in the flat areas. We would still use roll carpet goods up the steps and onto the top of the bema. And that may work out all right because those are going to be much less used than they have been even in the past. We've looked at upgrading the sound system, more exterior improvements. At one time, we were talking about maybe putting some stucco on some sides of the building to kind of just change the overall look. We'll see how the budget comes out on that. We definitely need to do the new signage with the new logo. And frankly, we definitely need to import the yard site lights from the Orchidash facility, from the Alvernon facility. And at this point, we have again not made a decision, but I think it would be prudent, since we've virtually used up all the space in the entry halls with the lighting that we have, that we should probably replace it all with the Orchidash type lighting, because it's a lot denser and we can handle everybody. And I for one would love to have some remembrance lights up for some of my family. So I haven't felt like I can do that up till now. So there are other aesthetic improvements. And if you look at our previous presentation, there was another 2 pages of them. So, but right now they're not something that we really can realistically think about. Here's the important thing. When we started up again in June, I knew that getting bids early was going to be a fruitless activity because they are never right. Costs are changing, and frankly, in the construction business, costs have been going up remarkably. I used to build apartments for $40 a square foot back in 1992, and today it's about 160. So there's been a tad bit of inflation in the construction industry, more than I think, well, maybe not more than everywhere else. So we assigned tasks to all of our members, and they all explored what the scope of the work was going to be, started lining up subcontractors. We're now ready to go out for bid. We're going to call for bids the middle of December, and then from December towards the end of the year, we will be evaluating those bids and putting together a final report of what we recommend to do and what those costs will be. And our anticipation is to do that, present that to the next board after the first of the year, and they will be in charge of figuring out where we want to spend our money, how much we want to spend, and where we're going to get it from. And we're not going to sell the facility. That is off the table for now. I don't know of anybody that wants to do that. And so there's some other options, from a windfall donation to borrowing money. And that's again out of my bailiwick. Other considerations. I talked about making sure there's enough office space, and we think there is. I talked about relocating the museum. We are in the process now of upgrading our telephone system, and we need to do that for 2 reasons. One is it's not adequate now, and it definitely won't be adequate when we get combined. And we'll probably have that done in the next 2 months or so, I think. The Wi-Fi system works pretty well, but there's some new technology with Wi-Fi 6 and mesh Wi-Fi that will allow us to get really good coverage throughout the facility with just one point of input. The other thing is the reopening of the facility for the new congregation. There's been a reopening committee, and Jim has been on that, but my understanding is that whereas we anticipated doing that early with the devastating increase in the virus, that's being put off a little bit. So we're not sure when we're going to reopen, but there is a committee evaluating all the things that we need to do to make sure that it's safe. I can tell you right now that the education, both the ECE and the religious schools, have very good sterilization equipment, and they sterilize the facilities like crazy on a regular basis. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm going to stop screen sharing. There we go. So now we've got questions, and so let me figure out how to get to my other screen here. Just try pushing escape.
Do you want me to share some with you, Steve?
Yeah, I have a couple here, and let me just go through those. This is one that was requested that we read it, and I'm not sure it's in my bailiwick, but I'm gonna read it anyway because I got too big an ego. No, I don't. It says, we would be grateful if this question were read and answered at this Sunday's upcoming facilities town hall on the topic of the proposed merger of our congregations. We have sent a copy to the finance co-chairs, because the question we wanted, oh, I've got the wrong question. Hang on. There's two questions also that I had, and then Donna, I'm going to let you take it from there. The south parking lot, we do not plan to put solar in. That was a question, and we are not sure we're going to do the landscaping. And I have some pictures of Temple that I could share, but if you look at the east entry, there's on the left side of the main entry, there's a white stucco relief with a candelabra, a sign that says the Schlanger Chapel, and then Temple Emmanuel on the left side with the logo. And then on the right side out by the brick, there's the words Temple Emmanuel. So those all need to be replaced. And now I'm going to try and go dig up that question. In fact, if you could read other ones while I'm doing this.
Okay, so one was the JCC considered for large gatherings rather than the Emmanuel facility?
It was not considered initially, and we have talked about it. And our feeling is that at the stage we are right now, that is probably a subject that could be explored by the new congregation and the new board in the future. I don't see that happening soon, but there are some pluses and minuses to doing that. And we've talked about that. But at the present time, the intent is not to address it.
Okay. What would the capacity of the sanctuary be if Orchodash was enlarged? I assume it means the Orchodash sanctuary.
Jim, could you answer that, or maybe Ben?
Yeah, the capacity of the sanctuary was set for 450 with an additional 300 in a community room behind it that could be opened up, and 150 in the entrance, which would be with collapsible walls, the entryway, the foyer. So that was the total number, but the sanctuary would be 450.
Yeah, and that compares to about 450 for the sanctuary and another 350 or so behind it. So they'd be comparable in capacity for the ritual situations.
Okay. Someone asked about the possibility of renting, I assume, the Orchodash property for concerts and renting out space for outside events.
The facilities committee did not address that, and I don't know whether the finance committee did or not. It sounds like a pretty good idea if we're hanging on to it. There's a number of things that can be done with that facility, and I'm not going to mention the first one, but the second is potentially leasing it, and the second would be to rent it out on special events. Just like one of the items we're looking at the country club facility is enhancing the side gesture, because we already have a stage and improve the lighting and sound characteristics and be able to host lots of concerts and other venues too. But they both would work. There's not one over the other.
Do the congregations get to vote on where to go for a facility?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Do the congregations get to vote on where to go for a facility? In other words, which facility are we going to go to?
No, and that's because the MOU, we had said that the assumption on the MOU that we everybody voted on last February was that we would be headquartered at Temple. That was following the initial assessments that Steve and the facilities did. Someone asked about have we considered renting JCC for large gatherings, and we did that in the past. It's expensive, but we had done that in the past. And there is my question about events had to do with Janice Cohen had mentioned that she was our cantor, that she was excited about the idea of holding concerts at the country club property that aren't possible at Orchodash property. And so that was the idea on whether we could have big events on site rather than renting out other places that we've done in the past. Thank you.
And Temple has had big events on site, so yes.
Yes.
Okay, other questions? what are the thoughts on the main and school bathrooms at Temple Emmanuel?
There are two school bathrooms that have already been improved. And there may, from a code standpoint, be a requirement if we expand the classrooms to put another one in. And we do have a utility room at the west end of the religious school, which is currently being used for mechanical equipment from the previous air conditioning system. That whole place could be gutted, and we could in fact put two more bathrooms back there. We've kind of taken a very cursory look, but we have thought about it.
How much would it cost for building a sanctuary on Alvernon compared to updating Country Club?
Well, I think that Jim may have answered that to some degree, and that the original proposals that were being considered a couple of years ago was to do just that, to build a new sanctuary, maybe combined with a multi-purpose room. Is that right, Jim?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and the cost of that was upwards of a 2.4 million, was it?
Between 1.9 and 2.1 with an additional 0.5 mil to work on the rest of the property.
Yeah. So if we all moved there, it'd be 2.4 to 3 million.
And what would it cost to upgrade the kitchen at the Country Club property?
We have not looked at that. I have just recently put in a kitchen comparable to that. It was about $80,000 if we totally gutted it and started all over. There is a lot of usable equipment in there, so I would say that it would be in the neighborhood of half of that. But you know, I don't have any firm bids, nor do I have a current design.
And someone asked, why do we need more office space? Are we increasing personnel?
I think the intent long-term is that we will not, but temporarily, I think I'm sort of stealing a little bit of the finance committee's thunder, but I think initially they said they were going to be having pretty much full staff from both places. But eventually the question is well based. We may not need more office space.
Yeah, to jump in here, the organizational chart for the new congregation does not have room for 100% of the employees from both congregations. But the fact is that currently the office space really does not accommodate everything we would want if we were able to have a wish list in terms of space and comfort. And Steve's absolutely right that no decisions have been made, but exploration of this for the comfort and efficiency of the staff working in the new congregation, those conversations have started.
As a full red-blooded male who cannot dual task, I did find this statement, the question that I was asked to read while we were doing everything else. So good for me. The Temple Emmanuel building could be a financial burden and perhaps in 5 years, too large for the congregation. We have not yet been given financial and membership projections to mitigate that concern. Will the leadership make a firm commitment to keeping the Orkadosh facility property, given that in a few years it may be the best fit to our needs?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, I will thank you because I don't want to.
Yeah.
Nor can I.
Yeah, you know, if our plan of consolidation, if we vote on that and if it passes, then the new congregation owns two properties. We own Alvernon property and we own Country Club property. And there are many options on what we might do for the future from there. There's no promise to maintain the Alvernon property. There's no plan to sell it either, because there are many options. And same with Temple property. We are beginning there. That's the plan. That's what we brought forward with the MOU. And so I don't know that, and you know, another issue is that neither Or Hadash nor Temple, as they stand right now, have authority to promise what new congregation might decide is in the best interest of new congregation together. Scott, did you want to add anything?
That was well said, Elaine. Nothing to add.
Okay.
Someone asked if the ECE could remain on Country Club and the rest of the facility go to Alvernon.
No. There's a longer answer, I'm sure. Maybe.
No, it would be really difficult to, if you have that, then you've got to maintain the whole facility. They're all one facility.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to make use of both properties. I don't know yet. There's many ideas, and the combined energy of both groups is really amazing with things that people bring forward. But we just haven't been able to explore all the possibilities of where we might go together if we do join together.
I like analogies. It would be as easy as dividing Siamese twins.
Can I jump in? Because this
Yes, please.
is kind of like what we were talking about before. And, as a committee, we made recommendations.
Sounds like
Introduce
David
yourself.
Vogel.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Ben Vogel, and I'm a immediate past president for Congregation Orthodox, and part of the
Facilities.
emerging committees, facilities committee as well. So the committees made recommendations based on what we thought the realistic direction should be initially, but in reality, both properties will both be assets of the combined new entity, and future decisions, and future doesn't have to be 10 years from now. It could just be, the next year or the year after. Those decisions will be made by the board of the new entity. So we're not planning on selling or permanently settling in either facility, because really this new entity, it'll be a decision for the new entity to make as necessary.
Yeah, and I'll remark that the bylaws that you'll see on a different session have a provision for a transitional board that is the combined boards of both congregations, which are within 1 or 2 people, same size. Okay, back to you, Steve.
No, that's Donna. Any more questions?
Yes, more questions.
Good.
Someone is asking about enlarging and improving the temple main bathroom.
We've tried to do that. Right now, there's no room for it. The only way to do that would be to get rid of the kitchen, and we don't want to do that. There's a limited amount of room. There's a small storage room behind the women's facility, and the other alternative would be to take the guest bathrooms, which are right next to the sanctuary on the east side of that corridor, which is a large lounge. It's got a couch in there, a bunch of chairs, and then off to the side is a handicapped toilet. That, if that were converted to a his or hers bathroom, then we would have room for the other 2 bathrooms to expand that into 1. And we haven't looked at that, but that certainly is feasible.
Have you considered having some people work from home rather than expanding office space?
That's not me.
Okay.
Was that it? Was that Vasili's question?
Yep.
It's happening everywhere, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happened here.
Will the cost of these renovations be paid for by an increase in membership dues, and how much more would be asked?
Our intention at this point is that membership dues would remain whatever you're committed to between now and July 1st, and the new board would consider how we want to address membership dues. So, but we aren't intending to raise membership dues in order to pay for changes or renovations at the Country Club property.
Someone would like you to say something about the size of the Country Club property compared to the Alvernon property.
Total square footage of the property is very close to each other. Temple Emmanuel is 4.62 acres, and I think the Alvernon facility is just over 4. Is that right, Jim?
It's 4.36 acres.
So they're very close to each other. Perhaps the only issue that I see with the Alvernon property is it's thinner and longer, which makes it more difficult to use, but it's very usable and we could definitely use it all. So
And what about the size of the buildings, like the capacity, the way they are now?
the country club property building is about 9,200 square feet total. And Jim, what's the Alvernon property?
Alvin, the administration building is 4,250 and the portables are 3,000 square feet each,
Okay,
or 2009.
let me just double check that number.
Yeah, I think the number on Country Club, Steve, is wrong.
Yeah, it's
Quite a
sorry.
bit bigger than that.
I said it. The square footage of the overall building. Thank you. I just looked it up. I did have that available. 37,000. We actually did an overall takeoff. 38,229.92 square feet.
That takes into consideration the sanctuary.
I had one of my guys at my company do a takeoff on the computer, so that's what we end up.
It seems the highest and best use of Country Club is to build apartments. Why fix up Country Club if it will be sold?
Well, as an apartment builder, but not a developer, I don't know. I know that developers are able to pay between $10,000 and $20,000 a unit. This typical apartments, especially in town like this, there might be a problem with zoning, I think, and also if you build like 20 units per acre and it's 4.8 acres, you can get just barely 100 units on it. It's very expensive property for building apartments, and we didn't think it was feasible, but I wouldn't rule it out. If we decide somehow that we don't want to stay at the Country Club property and we're not going to keep the ECE there, both of which I don't even like to talk about right now, but it's too early. But then we would have to start looking at things like, what can we do with that property?
To add to Steve's,
Donna, there was one more question, maybe
Yes.
Ben or Jim can answer.
There's
There was a
couple-
price tag of $150,000 before the merger talks started, that was discussed for social hall. So if they want to talk about that, because that's different than $1 million or $2 million.
Yeah, I think Scott wanted to speak. Scott, did you have something?
You're talking about at the Alvernon facility, Rena?
Yes. When we
Yeah.
first talked to the congregants, it was talks about expanding the community room.
At one point, we looked at trading out the double wide for a quad or twice the size of that facility. The cost to do that was somewhere in the neighborhood of between $155,000 and $200,000, and that would have given us approximate seating for up to about 350 people, but no social hall if we sat everyone, or seating for 200 and then a small social hall behind it. It could be divided into 4 rooms to be used for additional classrooms.
So we do have some more questions, Steve.
Wait, Scott was trying to speak. Can
Okay.
we go to Scott first?
thank you. The essential elements that were on the table the first time around at the memorandum of understanding that led to a decision that the Country Club facility was the best location for the new congregation to start its life, those elements have remained unchanged. It has to do with size, location, even construction and safety for religious school. In addition, the central nature that the early childhood education, the ECE, plays, and its current geographical location being near the University of Arizona. All those things are as they were. And so the Facilities Task Force, since the Memorandum of Understanding, was not necessarily challenging those fundamentals, but Steve did an excellent job today expressing the whole rationale, because the time passes and it's hard to remember all the details.
Okay, I think we're getting close to 4 o'clock. Did you have, what do you think? One more question, then we should switch over to finance?
Okay. This is because of the cost of repairs, would it be less expensive to modularize as others have done?
At the country club facility, I assume that's the question is?
I assume, but it doesn't say.
No, the cost of repairing, I don't know how you would put modules. You'd have to put modules if it's at the country club facility, you'd have to put them in the south parking lot or tear out part of the building. And that seems like that would be counterproductive. We need the parking and we have the classrooms that we have and they're in decent shape. They could always be remodeled a little bit, but we've been gradually doing that anyway.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I understand the full intent of that question.
Yeah, I think it was someone had talked about using modulars for office space or something if we were short, but
Oh, okay. I don't think we need to do that. We'll figure it out in the existing facility.
Okay, the last thing I will just say is that someone asked to thank you, Steve, and the facilities committee for all your diligence, dedication, and hard work.
Thank you very much. I want to particularly thank my entire committee. We've all worked really hard and we're almost at the end of the second phase, third phase being actually doing the work. So thank you guys. You saw their names at the beginning and I very much appreciate that last remark because I'm already skinny, but if you look at me from the back, I almost disappear.
thank you. Thank you. And it has been, and we have so much talent. It's exciting that we have had access to all that volunteer talent. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We're going to turn our attention now to the Finance Task Force. Gary Kipper is both first Vice President at Congregation Or Hadash and also Chair of the Joint Finance Committee. And Gary will introduce the treasurers and others who will be participating in their presentation. Gary?
Thank you, Elaine. I appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. I know a couple hours of Zoom on a Sunday is tough, but we really appreciate you being here for this. I'm going to start off by showing the first slide. Mark Ross, if you could bring that up, please.
And introduce everybody too.
Yeah, it's on the first slide. I'm going to introduce
Okay,
everybody. And well, maybe the second slide. There it is. Like I said, like Elaine so graciously announced, I'm the chair of the Joint Finance Committee. Jeffrey Rain is the treasurer for Temple Emmanuel. Mark Ross is the treasurer from Or Hadash. Both those guys have done a great job. Actually, my entire team. Jerry Cohn is from Temple Emmanuel, a CPA. Marty Zuckerman from Or Hadash, and then Jim Wesselman from Or Hadash also. So I'm going to go a little differently than Steve did. I'm going to go over some things before Mark goes into his PowerPoint, and I'm going to answer some of the questions we've already received so that it'll have some context going forward. So the first thing I'm going to say is, you know, the projections, everybody wants to know, well, we projected so much money and then now, you know, we're our first year combined, there's a deficit except for the cash that I will say Temple Emmanuel, for those that were wondering, is coming into this with a $200,000 surplus that they've graciously agreed not to spend on the building that they could have, but they were waiting until this merger, if it happens, is done. So there is some money for that to start with out of the 400 or 500 that Steve was talking about. So the projections were, you know, very good. We had six-figure, you know, surpluses, so on and so forth. But as everybody knows, COVID happened, and you know, Mark will get into it more, but we projected. Everybody says, "Well, did you project for COVID and losing members and everything?" And we absolutely did. You'll see in one of the slides that, you know, due to the URJ, they said you're going to lose 10% of the membership and you're going to get them back in 2 years, 5% a year. I think I'm the optimist of the group. I think there's a huge buzz in this community about what we're attempting to do here. I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, I can't wait for this to happen. I want to join. So I wouldn't count on that. We haven't played for any of that. But you know, it's there. So that's projections. We'll go into that. Then speaking about the people have said, what about the financial strength of both congregations? You know, that the Temple people are thinking, well, we're trying to get them because we want their building, and the Orthodox people say they just want us so we can sell their property and fix up their building. I'm going to tell you, neither of those is true. They couldn't be farther from the truth. This group, this joint finance committee, or the joint executive committee, has been so great to work with. It's been one of the real pleasures in my community career here. So both, you know, we have looked at each other's books, and there is, you know, the books look good. I mean, the balance sheets are, both synagogues are on sound financial footing. Now you say, well, why are we joining them? Well, first of all, I think because we can really do something exciting. That's my primary. But the secondary would be the cash flow from both isn't going to be as good. If we do something now, we can affect our future now instead of letting the future affect us going forward. So balance sheets are good. We've done the due diligence. There's no liens on either property. There's no, except for the solar panels on each one. As a matter of fact, when I asked for everybody to bring this info to me, we need liens and everything. All we came up with was some copier contracts on both of us. So I don't think anybody's going to join or not join or go for merger over the copier contracts. I think we're good there. But anyway, there's no UCC ones. There's nothing. The due diligence has been done by everybody on both sides, looking at each other's closet, so to speak. Then you get to building repair, and Steve said it would be $400,000 to $500,000. We've been in touch with him. Well, first of all, there's $200,000 in that they have now that they could start with if we had to, but if we need to use some of that for, as you'll see, some of the shortage that we're anticipating for year one, Mark Ross did the calculations, and we could do a 15-year note for $3,000 a month that would take care of all of that. So we don't have to raise dues. We don't have to sell Orthodox's property. We don't have to do anything. The only thing we have to do is going forward, we need better, more people, and hopefully after COVID, we could do something like that. So, and then, the other thing, I hear the same thing. Are we going to sell? So are we going to sell the property at Alvernon? Are we going to sell this? Like everybody else has said, and I will reiterate this, it has never come up in any of our meetings that we are going to sell the Alvernon property or the country club property. Well, the best in use would be if we could lease it out forever and collect revenue from it. If that's available, that would be great. For right now, the Jewish Community Center is renting it out from us. And, if they rent it for the next 20 years, that would be great. We never have to sell it. But that's going to be a decision for the next board, for the combined board, and for us to say we are going to sell it or not going to sell it. I think Elaine was very succinct. She said, that's not our decision, and it's not a commitment we can, not a commitment that we can make either way. So that's on the building. Now, there's also been mention of audits. And so, somebody said, well, there was going to be audits of both the books and this and that. Well, we got into that, and we figured out it would be probably $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to audit each other's books. And I could see that if we thought that there was fraud in either one, or if there was somebody was hiding something. But I mean, we have CPAs and brilliant CPA people on both sides of this, to where there's no need for that. I think the Temple Emmanuel has had some issues because they were going to a new Shul Cloud thing. But I mean, we've looked at their books, and there's nothing hiding there. If there was, something would have come up on the liens. As far as Orthodox, I think Marty Zuckerman can answer this later, but I think we had an audit in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think going forward, it would definitely, I am pushing that if this merger goes through, I would push for an audit every 3 years, mandatory. It should be an audit. So now we're going to talk about projections. And I think I messed up. I think I was supposed to let Jeffrey talk about that. So Mark was going to talk about projections, but I guess I kind of stole his thunder. I'll let him do that in his slideshow. But I'd like Jeffrey to talk about a few things. Jeffrey's a treasurer from Temple Emmanuel. About people have asked about dues. Are they going to go up? What are they going to do? And ECE, what do we do with ECE? Oh my gosh, will it be here, years from now? And I think he's got some info on projections 2 to 3 years out. So Jeffrey, would you like to take over, please?
Thank you so much, Gary. And I recognize that Temple Emmanuel is a big black box for the Or Hadash members. And if you are being invited to join us on our adventure in Reform Judaism going forward, you kind of want to know what we are. And you want to be confident, and I'm sympathetic with that. So my ability to prove to you what I know to be true in this forum is very limited. And so you should feel free to come at me with questions requesting more details, documentation, evidence, and I'm happy to provide it. What I have seen that reflects some of the concerns about Temple Emmanuel specifics. The ECE, the Early Childhood Education Center, which is the preschool run, organized, established, maintained, and rendered absolutely extraordinary by Lynn Henry, who's in this forum. Thank you so much, Lynn. Remains a profit center, or I should say a positive cash flow part of Temple Emmanuel, even now, with extraordinary restrictions on enrollment and extraordinary costs regarding COVID precautions. The ECE generates revenue net for Temple every month right now. The ECE has always been oversubscribed. We have year after year added rooms because there are more people that want to get in than can fit. We have now consumed every possible room that we've been able to think of, brought them up to appropriate levels for ECE use. There is every reason to believe and strong evidence to support the contention that as soon as the brakes of COVID are released on the capacity of ECE, it will spring back immediately, or as fast as COVID allows, to its prior enrollment, and the cost per student goes down as that happens. Traditionally, ECE has generated about $30,000 a month in net revenue. For Temple, currently it's closer to 10 per month. It's $100,000 plus a wonderful service to the community. So ECE has never been a problem for Temple. ECE is an asset for Temple. Additionally, people have asked me over and over again about the dues structure. And that's a really important question. People are concerned that they are going to be shut out of a new congregation by a subsequent dues structure. There is no interest on anybody on either side that I have seen to make a combined congregation less inclusive than its constituents. And the combined congregation will be us. We, the finance committee, did not project, hypothesize, fantasize, or imagine any dues structure. We just took total dues, the gross number, discounted it for anticipated losses and then subsequent gains in the out years, God willing. But what our collective dues structure will be is up to us. And it's the same us that you already know from your home congregation. So if you trust your home congregation to consider your needs and situations, then you'll trust us, because we're just us. There's nobody coming that you don't know. So having said all that, what else you want me to talk about, Gary?
I'd like to everybody, just so you know, a lot of people wanted us to do second and third year projections. And unfortunately, the professionals in our group said you can't do it. There's too much pie in the sky. But we did look at it, cursorily. So Jeffrey was involved in a little bit of that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so there were, so I really reticent to do anything like that, but other members of the combined financial cultures of the two congregations have gone through the exercise. And seeing what I've seen, I think the numbers are generally encouraging. What I can say is in some of the models that have been presented to us, I think that they understate the upside, specifically the upside for ECE. So all of the models generated by folks coming out of Or Hadash have assumed a constant ECE revenue, and that just cannot possibly be a most likely scenario. Of course, anything is possible. In terms of the dues and donations, there's a kind of a different vocabulary that Or Hadash and Temple Emmanuel use to account for contributions to the temple that are not dues. But Temple has always historically and in the recent past overperformed in terms of what we call donations. Or Hadash divides it in high holy base. They're broken up slightly differently. But I can tell you, based on what I've seen, both from projections derived by others and my own understanding of the fundamentals of at least the Temple Emmanuel side, the out years, third, fourth, which don't even include, and which the Finance Committee has not budgeted for synergies, savings, redundancy reductions, and therefore cost reductions, the out years are very encouraging. The reason why I'm not a big fan of presenting that to the combined congregations in this setting is because all of it is contingent on decisions that the leadership of the combined congregation will make. It is entirely reasonable and appropriate to assume that the combined congregation will only be stronger than its components. The decisions about what we want to buy and what we want to do will determine what those out years are. But every projection that I've seen is encouraging.
Thank you very, very much, Jeffrey. Very well said. Now you know why I make sure he's on this committee. So now let's go to, let me introduce Mark Ross, the treasurer at Or Hadash. And Mark, would you like to go ahead and present your PowerPoint now?
Sure. So the committee analyzed a number of things when we were looking at what this budget, and I call it a budget just for simplification, but it's really more of a cash flow projection than a budget. But it does give us an indication of what we think income and expenses are going to look like. And we analyze them for accuracy, for future short-term expectations. Again, not addressing a lot of the second, third, fourth, fifth year issues. The impact of COVID, we were concerned, obviously, what's going to happen there. And then any membership declines that may result as because of the potential new congregation, and ultimately any other appropriate criteria. So we looked at all of these factors to make sure that we knew, starting with both Or Hadash's and Temple's financial statements and budgets and actual figures, and we started from that point to move forward. We were considering a couple of revenue adjustments areas. We thought we were going to see some decrease in potential revenue as a result of dissatisfaction with the creation of a new congregation. As Gary mentioned, URJ predicts a 10% loss the first year and then 5% recovery in years 2 and 3. We only considered the reduction. We didn't consider the recovery. And we also obviously are concerned about COVID-19 and what impact that had to revenue going forward. And then obviously these income areas can affect membership dues, general fund contributions, fundraising activities, high holiday revenue, and facilities rentals. So all of these are the areas that would be impacted by a reduction in potential income loss. Then we looked at expenses, any kind of major considerations for expenses, and the economies of scale. As an example, we're not going to need 2 phone systems. We're not going to need 2 sets of copier leases, those types of things. There's going to be some economies of scale that will occur. And we're also looking at the use of the Temple Emmanuel campus. So we recognize that the expenses on the Orkadash or on the Alvernon campus would be changing because it wouldn't be the same impact. It wouldn't have the same impact of use that it would at the country club campus. Future considerations, there's certain things that we know need to be addressed, but we did not take into consideration. Again, this is the first year's numbers. So we did not take into consideration anything for a clergy search. That could be something that's upcoming in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. We don't know specifically, but all 4 of our clergy are at some point on the short end of their careers or at the end of their careers as opposed to the beginning of their careers. So this could be something that needs to be looked at. Audit expense, as Gary addressed, we've built that into future considerations. Any reserves, we want to have some kind of a line item specifically for reserves so that we know that we have a set aside for monies just in case something happens out of the ordinary. Property improvements need to be addressed, as you heard from Steve and also from Gary, about how those are going to be paid for. And then the last thing, of course, is Orkadash has a anonymous family foundation donation that was not included in this particular proposal that I'm about to show you because we can't budget it. We can't count on it. It's been consistent year in and year out, but we felt like the prudent approach would be to be as conservative as possible. So we did not include some additional funds that that family foundation provides us. As far as our congregational income goes, this is the breakdown of the major categories that we have for the congregation. As you can see, the majority of it is membership dues, 820,000. This number was arrived at by looking at the current budgets of both congregations, then discounting it because of COVID, and then discounting it again because of a potential loss in membership. So this is a pretty accurate number that we feel we can justify. Certainly people could come up with more or less than this number. No better rationale for any other number than what we're providing. But this is what we feel is a very solid number for the first year. General fund contributions as well. This is where a lot of the funds from Temple Emmanuel's endowments go, well, actually from their general fund contributions, which, as Jeff alluded to briefly, Orkadash and Temple treat their incoming donations a little bit differently. So we've kind of allocated them in different categories. The solar reimbursement question did come up. That $40,000 is a check that Temple Emmanuel gets back from the Tucson Electric Power for its saving of utilities. So Temple actually will get or does get a check for $40,000 a year, which we anticipate will be continuing. So the total revenue stream is about $1.3 million that we anticipate the first year. Expenses, this is obviously, I apologize for the way this looks, but it's I tried to get it all on one screen. So it's as consolidated as we could be, but this shows you what the employees, again, this is congregation only. This is not religious school or ECE. So you can see what the staff picture looks like, the facilities, buildings itself. And again, we're looking at primarily the country club property. We do have an expense line item in there for conserving the Alvernon property to make sure that we maintain it in a mothballed state. If it is used beyond a mothballed state, then obviously this number is going to change. We've got the solar leases in there, and then a number of administrative office types of things as well in programming. So we're about 1.458 million on congregational expenses. Religious school, we're showing, this is the latest numbers as of just about a week ago. What the current numbers are, we did see a slight reduction in the registrants, primarily because evidently a lot of the students don't like the Zoom only environment. They want some sort of a hybrid environment, and certainly that's, I'm sure Rena can address this, but that's at some point going to be back on the fence or back on the activity. And these numbers should go back up to where they were. B'nai mitzvah and other fees are basically, my chart doesn't quite show it right, but there was some substance coming from other areas besides B'nai mitzvah that I just lumped them together. So religious school income about 97,000. Religious school expenses, we have about 167,000, no anomalies here. It's just pretty much payroll and what it costs to maintain those students. So we have a net loss for the first year expectation of about $70,000. And the way that is being supported is from each congregation at this point support half of it. So Temple would put up 35, Or Kadash would put up 35, and that's how that would be covered. As far as ECE goes, these are numbers that Jeff discussed. We've got about $1.2 million in tuitions and then some other programming, grants and endowments coming in. So about $1,228,500 is the number that we're using. And again, this is supported by the activity, the restricted activity that's currently going on as a result of COVID. COVID has cut back the number of students that we can have in the program. And once those COVID limitations are lifted, then we're gonna, as Jeff said, we're gonna see those go up. And then ECE expenses, we're showing about $1 million in salaries. And again, nothing out of the ordinary in other expenses. We have allocated separate janitorial line item for ECE to make sure that it's properly sanitized, that type of thing. So there's a separate contract for ECE facilities. So the net income for ECE shows a profit in today's world and what we figure in the future going forward, the first year, of $114,000. So in consolidation, we're looking at the congregational income of $1,299,000, religious school income of $97,000, ECE income of $1,228,500. So we're looking at $2.6 million coming into the operation overall. Congregational expenses of $1,157,900, religious school expenses $167,000, and then ECE of $1,114,000 for a total of $2,739,000, which leaves about $115,000 in operations, net loss operations the first year. Now, what's important to recognize in this, as you remember looking at those charts, the biggest bulk of all of this was in payroll. And we included all staff in this analysis. So we didn't make any presumptions, and we actually built in a slight increase in some areas of those salaries for people that may be underpaid. So we were trying to be the most conservative we could be when it came to the payroll picture, certainly with attrition and some changes that could be coming down the road at some point with a future board decision. You know, these could change, but right now under a worst case scenario, we're looking at about $115,000 loss, and Temple Emmanuel is contributing in their reserves $186,000 to that to offset that. So we're looking at a net income for the first year of $71,000. So we anticipate after the first year, we will have a $71,000 carry forward into the second year to be used in connection with whatever that budget looks like. So that's the presentation. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to address them. There were a number of questions that came before, that came to us before. I think they've mostly been addressed, although I'm not sure we've got all of them. But is there any specific questions that have come in during the presentation? Okay, Donna.
Yes, there are two that actually came in during the first presentation, but they're financial. One was, why would we need the ECE income? Maybe we could start an ECE on Alvernon.
That would be, again, a decision that a new board would have to make. The ECE is an existing existing organization at the country club facility. We didn't want to disrupt that. We felt like in the first year with everything else that's going on, to make any major decisions like that would be disruptive. You know, after the first year, theoretically, anything could happen, but we
Can you
didn't feel
stop-
it was appropriate to make that change.
Can you stop sharing screen, Mark?
Sure.
Okay.
Second question, how much equity is in the Alvernon property?
Let me answer that last one first, and we'll go
Oh,
on to that one.
sorry.
All right. One reason we had actually thought at Orhadosh about having an EC of some type, but we're right across the street from Jewish Community Center. That's pretty stiff competition. And the one at Temple is closer to universities. But however, you know, who knows in the future? Go ahead, Donna, with whatever.
How much
Hold on.
equity is in the Alvernon property?
So the Alvernon property, as you saw from the initial presentation, was valued at about $1.5 million or something like, I can't remember, $1.4 million, and it's free and clear. So that's the equity position.
Okay, the next, it's actually two questions, but they go together. Isn't it true that the funds being brought by Temple Emmanuel include $160,000 of PPP money? And what part of Temple's $200,000 reserve is the PPP loan?
Jeff can probably best answer this piece of it.
And actually, Donna and I and all of us know the answer, which is that money is reserved. The PPP loan had conditions for forgiveness, which have been met. And so whatever money's left over is just Temple's. There is no obligation to pay back the money that Temple got, which was a lot, and which was part of the one of the key contributors to the strong financial position of Temple at this time. But no, Temple does not need to pay any of that money back because it's already met the criteria for forgiveness. And that's why we're calling it reserve money, not PPP money, whatever's left over.
Okay, where would the money come from to be able to meet the $3,000 per month interest on a note, borrowing money to meet expenses?
Hold on. I think I could answer that. I'm going to answer two questions with that. You know, we're talking about ECE, and we're talking about that there would be a $70,000 carryover to year two, but we're running in a deficit. What are we going to do in this $3,000, which is $36,000 a year? What you have to also realize is before COVID, the ECE was netting over $250,000 a year. And like Jeffrey said, as soon as COVID subsides, and I mean, obviously nobody knows when, but we're not looking at years now. I think, you know, we're looking at a shorter time frame, that there's a line at the door to get into ECE. So we didn't book this anywhere, but you know, there's another $125,000 to $150,000 of net income waiting. It's almost like in the bank. So that would cover the operating shortfall. It would also help cover the $3,000 a month payment. And that's if we don't generate any income from leasing or renting out Orhadosh. So I think really, and that's not with any more dues. I mean, we're looking, once COVID's over, you're going to get more kids back into Hebrew school. You're going to get more people coming back to synagogue. Hopefully their economy is better and we get more congregants coming back that can afford it. Like I said, I wouldn't in good faith put that in any kind of projection, but realistically, I mean, just listening to this, the numbers are all going to be there. I mean, that stuff is realistic. It's going to happen. I think all this stuff would be taken care of without us getting into debt. So.
Okay. How can we support a merger when we don't know which facility we will be attending? And they continue with the original concept at previous meetings was to sell Orhadosh and move to Temple Emmanuel. Why can't the boards remain with this concept today? I feel I have been let down by moving away from what was definitely discussed earlier.
I I'm sorry, they said that Temple Emmanuel, we were going to be staying at at Alvernon or Country Club, which property?
Country Club, sorry.
Okay, no, we're not, that hasn't changed. That has not changed. I mean, the MOU said Country Club and we haven't changed that. Country Club is going to be the location.
And we had never confirmed, I mean, people have talked all along, should we sell or Alvernon or not? That's never been decided.
Right.
People talked about all sorts of things, but the MOU said that we would be headquartered at the Alvernon property.
Country Club.
Country Club.
I'm
property.
sorry.
Country Club.
Oh, I'm gonna make more
Elaine,
confusion, I'm sorry.
Elaine.
Okay. What will the financial impact, hang on. What financial impact might Rabbi Cohen's congregation have on our merger and losing members?
Is Rabbi Wilson or Rabbi Lockheim here?
No. I'm going to jump into that one because Rabbi Lockheim is having a drink, I'm sure. And Salson I can't see, but he should be having a drink. I would say, I don't want to put them on the spot. I would say anything that's happened already has already happened as far as Rabbi Cohen. But when I look at competitors, whether it's in business or anything else, I'm going to get on a little soapbox here. I feel that you play your own game. Okay. We're going to come up with the best product and the best thing that we can at our location that fits us with the best people. And we're going to let the chips fall that may. I never play a game thinking what competitors are doing. And to be honest, I want everybody in the Jewish community to do well. Everybody. A rising tide floats all boats. I don't want to see anybody do poorly, but I want us to see us do just a little better. Okay.
When we haven't in the last year or two had any major effect at all from other congregations as far as membership. We've stayed stable or Hadash.
How much is there in the family foundation and will that end upon merger?
Rena has that one? Can Rena have that one?
Yeah. Rena, can you answer that?
I can't see if she's here.
She's here. She's just trying to unmute. I can see her going.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. We received a very nice substantial gift this year of 104. 30,000 of it is designated for salaries, which they have done yearly for the last few years. So that's anticipated. The remaining 74,000 that they've given us this year was given for our discretion in the general operation. They have been very generous and very consistent, but we don't count on it because it's presumptuous of us to count on something that is given as a gift and not as an automated proposal. So I'm hoping
And
that
as I mentioned,
I'm just going to say that I think, not that they've confirmed for sure, but I think that they have expressed interest in our coming together, and I think that they will support it, but that's just my opinion. It's not based on facts.
Mark?
and just to follow up on that, the $74,000 that Rena was just indicating was not built into our proposed cash flow analysis that I just displayed. So we ignored it, even though it's there.
Okay, Rabbi Salson will have to be replaced in 2021. Would a replacement cost more? And is that included?
Scott? I'll let Scott do that.
Right. So the rabbinic future with respect to who will be working with Rabbi Lockheim after Rabbi Salson's current contract expires on June 30th or at the end of the day, June 30th, 2021. That rabbinic future is to be determined. We have, or I should really say the Joint Finance Task Force has, for financial assumption reasons, built in that there will be two rabbis, and there are options that have been presented to us, the possible extension of Rabbi Salson, as well as potentially other options. Those are not yet decisions that we're able to make. We do have a small team that is looking into what would make the most sense, which will, of course, then be brought to the Joint Executive Committee, and ultimately the decision will be in hands of the transition board after the vote.
If the ECE was so profitable, why is Temple having financial problems prior to ECE?
So those are two separate questions. So the ECE was and remains profitable. That's just so. The broader question of what is the overall financial circumstances of Temple is a fair one, but doesn't change the fact that ECE makes money and traditionally made a lot of money and still makes a lot of money, just not as what it has done traditionally. What to me is a lot of money, over $100,000 is a lot of money. In terms of what is it that's been a financial challenge for Temple Emmanuel, that's a very long list. And I'd be happy to go into that. Right now, the good news is for this year, we budgeted a balanced budget for 2020, 2021. We didn't budget a deficit, which I think Or Hadash did, although they're going to exceed, based on what I know, they're going to exceed their projections baked into their existing budget. Our existing budget is balanced before PPP, which then led to this reserve. So right now, Temple Emmanuel is fiscally stable, is sustainable, and is exceeding the projections in our budget.
What income do you project for the Alvernon property, whether it be from renting to the JCC or THA or whatever?
Again, that goes to the future year's board's decisions or finance committee decisions. We again did not predict or project any sort of income numbers, but theoretically, if we rented that space out, we would easily cover any mortgage payment we would have on repairs to the country club property. So, I mean, there's that option is certainly on the table, but we did not predict anything because that's second or third year decisions.
Okay, the last question that I have here is, what are the projections for membership 5 and 10 years out?
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Oh,
you
there's so many things that could affect that. There are so many moving parts to that question. You know, Bev Sandock and others from Federation have been trying to figure that out nationally. Is there an increase in unaffiliated? Are we going to do more of our services might remain virtual? You know, we've experienced that we had more people attending virtual services than we ever had come on Friday nights. So there's all sorts of possibilities on how we might respond to contemporary trends. I have no idea what it might be. And we don't have that, whether we stay together or separate. We don't know. Scott, anything else?
Thank you. I think, again, well said, Elaine. All projections of any type made by anyone have an error margin around them. And while we have excellent people who have prepared the projections you're looking at today, I think we should recognize that it's impossible to predict the future, and there will be some type of error margin around them. We project, we make the best possible decisions based on that. We read and react to actual information, and we make course corrections. This is the day in and day out, week in, week out of managing a synagogue, and I think it will be the same, confident it will be the same in the new entity. Just one small correction to an earlier thing. While there is reason to have confidence in the PPP having met criteria, we're not able to say that for certain at this time until documentation is prepared and submitted.
And we have a couple more questions. Did Or Hadash receive PPP funds as well?
Yes, we did, and we spent them.
As we spent ours.
Yes, we didn't get anywhere near as much. That was probably my fault. I think I went through the wrong entity to get the PPP money from. But we brought them in. It was about $34,000, and we spent it according to the requirements.
And then there was a comment that the younger generation doesn't seem to be attached to a building. And has this been taken into consideration?
I guess I need more to know, has it been taken into consideration in what way?
It doesn't say.
I have heard that, go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, Elaine. From a financial committee's perspective, no, we did not take that into consideration. We looked at the financial elements of what we're all pretty much used to. And certainly this COVID thing has changed, as Elaine said, about a lot of online activities. But we just looked at it from the perspective of the traditional model that a synagogue with Friday and Saturday night services, and et cetera, et cetera.
There is the idea that one of the committees that we hope to energize is one on innovations or imagination. And one of those is how can we reach younger people who are not so interested in a building. And there's many ideas on how to do outreach or how to meet the needs of different demographics. Anybody else?
It appears that Rabbi Lockheim would like to say something.
Good.
So, one of the things that's suggested by some of the questions, some of the responses, is that synagogues produce the same product. And that's not really true at all. So there are weaknesses and there are strengths in the team at Congregation Or Hadash, and their weaknesses and strengths at Temple Emmanuel. And one of the things we're looking to do, and we've already done in a number of different ways, but we're really looking to do once we really can bring our heads and minds together, is to bring some innovation and creativity and some diversity in what Reform Judaism can provide in Tucson, Arizona. So one of the examples comes from this very question. If we simply were going to operate the same way we've already operated, we would simply have services in a building, and we would do life cycle events either in the building or in people's homes, occasionally go out to the Northwest and serve a meal to someone, and we would be in the same shape that we are in today. This very question about, what about the youth, that not only do they don't care about a building, they don't care about institutions, but what this new generation does like is something related to them personally. So one of the two institutions that this generation likes is Starbucks. And do you know why they like Starbucks? And this is not to demean anyone who is of this generation, because Starbucks puts your name on the cup. And then so many of these young kids, they do Instagram or Snapchat, with their name on a cup. So the idea is, can we create a religious outreach program that touches the individual in a way that we have only been touching people institutionally? And that's one of the creative, innovative, and inspiring opportunities we have when we bring these two communities together. So it's not, you cannot predict what's going to happen 5 years down the road, because we need to get together and be thoughtful and creative in how we approach our community as we move forward.
Thank you.
And the person that wrote that question also talked about future, how this would affect, or did you take into consideration future membership and expanded online presence?
I think
Can I comment on that?
Pardon me?
Can I comment on that? It's Marjorie. Donna, can you hear me?
Sure.
Go ahead, Marjorie.
Okay. All right, good. I want, you know, COVID reality has so blown up our usual way of doing things that it's easy to forget that. I think I can speak for both of our congregations that we haven't been standing still. That before COVID, Temple launched the Hebrew at Home program, where we were able to offer Hebrew school virtually to families, so that for people for whom it was a hardship to get to Temple on a Tuesday afternoon for Hebrew school, children could still be in Hebrew class. We've for quite a while been streaming services, so people who are homebound or who are states away from their grandchild's bar bat mitzvah and can't travel for whatever reason can still participate in services. We've started all kinds of creative programs to try to involve people in new and different ways. So, you know, we haven't been standing still before, and we certainly won't be going forward. And a lot of what we've learned from this experience of reaching people in the pandemic is going to inform what we do going forward.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback on that question a little bit, yes, we have looked at we have some formulas that we have tweaked that I want to thank Howard Paley for putting a lot of this together with us, that looking at second and third year projections based upon an expectation of membership growth and the obvious ultimate increase in revenue. So yes, we haven't looked at 5 and 10 years out, but we've started to look at least the revenue stream side of things in year 2 and year 3.
Thank you, Donna. In light of the time and the agenda, we'd welcome an additional question if there is one, and if not, we'll move to the next.
Well, there's a comment on this same subject that says, if we're going to do more online and away from the building, therefore a big building is not needed in the same way. So that was a comment, if anybody wants to comment on it. And there have been, just to tell everybody, a number of questions that have not been on the topics that we have been discussing this afternoon, and they will be answered directly to you by Scott or Elaine, hopefully in the next few days.
Okay, thank you. A warm thanks to Steve Toffel and the joint facilities team, to Gary Kipper, the treasurers, and the entire joint finance task force. This is not easy work. As a rabbi recently reminded me, this is holy work. And so thank you so much for the time investment that is so apparent in what you present. One other quick note, and we will move on in the agenda. Please note that the excitement and the energy that will take place in a new congregation, should it materialize in accordance with the next vote, is really quite remarkable. But there are many things that we're just not going to know until we go down that journey together. I will say that the most important person in our journey is you. So your energy, your commitment, and the excellent ideas and participation that you provide today to your independent congregation will serve as an excellent starting point for our new congregation. With that, let me introduce Cantor Janice Cohen. Cantor Cohen has some concluding remarks for us.
I do, and they usually come with guitars, so bear with me. But I think as we approach Thanksgiving, we have to think about how grateful we should be that we have two congregations that are vibrant and love themselves. Our members are all so loyal to our congregations and so passionate about them that sometimes we forget that the members of the other congregation are just as passionate for good reason. And so what we need to do is open ourselves up to see the beauty in both congregations and try to build something, not abandoning our congregations, but build something upon the foundation, upon the shoulders of those who came before us. And this is my prayer for all of us. Please sing with me. May we be blessed as we go on our way. May we be guided in peace. May we be blessed with health and joy. May this be our blessing. Amen. May this be our blessing. Amen. May this be our blessing. Amen. May we be sheltered by the wings of peace. May we be kept in safety and in love. May grace and compassion find their way to every soul. May this be our blessing. Amen. Now, if we were together in a sanctuary, at this point, our arms would go up around each other, and let's pretend. May this be our blessing. Amen. May this be our blessing. Amen. May Thanksgiving be a time of health and safety and love.
Thank you, Cantor Cohen, and thanks to everyone for your participation. We are adjourned.